Lance, thank you for sitting down with me. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for taking the time today.
Of course. Now, before we get started, please introduce yourself.
My name is Lance Lehman. I'm a senior wealth manager, a senior wealth advisor at a firm called Alternative Wealth. We're a remote first fee-based or fee-only advisory firm that does discretionary money management and holistic wealth planning.
But that sounds amazing. Can you tell me a bit more about your business? How long have you been in the industry for? And, sort of how did you get started?
Sure. Yeah, I started over 20 years ago on the brokerage side of the world and worked in that arena for a couple different, number of different years for a couple different companies. And then found my way, I migrated over into the RIA space in 2007 and worked for a larger discretionary manager for many years. And then recently made the change to a holistic wealth advisory firm. My background is in psychology and, like I said, comprehensive wealth management for our clients and helping them, achieve whatever the goals are for their money.
That sounds amazing. So you probably use your degree a lot in order to deal with some of your clients and make sure they're getting on the right path.
Yeah. Shockingly so. If I were able to have a conversation with myself 20 some years ago, 25 years ago, I would have never imagined that I would have been into finance, number one. And number two, I was often kind of chastised by friends and colleagues for having a degree in psychology. What value will that be? And I can assure you that in our business, that is every bit as important as any mathematical calculation you might be able to come up with. Because you're right, you're dealing with one of the most emotional matters in people's lives, which is their wealth and their well-being. And so, helping clients, navigate from their biases as well as avoiding my own. We all are human. We all have biases. It's incredibly powerful to be able to identify them. And we're always a work in progress. So I try to remember that. So.
Yeah. Well, that's amazing because I feel like a lot of the times the emotional aspect of the business isn't given enough credit. It's not looked at as closely as, let's say, asset allocation, right? Or, being tactical with your cash.
Yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with you on that. As biased as I may be on that, but I can assure you from having worked with clients for over 20 years and gone through the financial crisis in 08, 09, and even in the pandemic, emotions rule is what I would say, because it's not for lack of intellect. Clients are incredibly smart. They come from varied backgrounds. But they're all human, and when things aren't going the way that they anticipated or expect, it can be very challenging for them to stay committed to their plan. I would say just as equally challenging when things are going exceedingly well or exceeding their plan. Oftentimes, you're dealing with the other side of that coin, where they feel maybe a little too confident and maybe start to get a little too aggressive in their portfolios. So yeah, it's always a balancing act, helping clients keep even keeled on that. So.
Right. Well, you mentioned the pandemic. How was the pandemic for you and your team? What were some of the big challenges that you guys were faced with?
That's a great question. It's definitely changed the industry. It certainly changed the way that I approach my work and the way I approach clients and so forth. Because I think it's just changed the world. At the time, I was with a different firm, and what I learned from going through that period was that many firms were wildly unprepared for any type of event as such. We all recognize the scale of it was unprecedented. However, what was fascinating to me is see how some firms really adapted and became better and quicker and more nimble with just recognizing that the landscape had changed. Trying to use the old paradigm, if you will, of forcing people to come into an office was obviously a non-starter because of the pandemic and because of COVID. Yet you still had firms that were just committed to seeing that angle through, not recognizing that the other opportunities that I would say are out there is that like one of the reasons I'm with Alternative Wealth is because it's a remote first company. It's been built from the ground up to be completely flexible and mobile. I happen to call Florida home, but I work with clients all over the country and I meet with clients all over the country. I'm here in San Diego. I can continue to do my job pretty much from anywhere in the world that I can access information and access communication techniques with clients. So I would say that is, to me, the biggest changes that when you recognize the need to adapt and be able to communicate differently with clients than perhaps you had in the past. And conversely, clients also adapted. If you would have said to somebody, we're going to do a video call, 5 years ago, that would have been, in many cases, no, we just want to talk on the phone or we want to meet in person. But now, of course, everybody's pretty well versed in Zoom or Google Meet or whatever version they might happen to use, and they seem to accommodate. Some cases they actually like it better than maybe a little too casual sometimes. But the point being is that it's definitely changed the industry, and I think that those that aren't adapting to it are just destined to no longer be. So.
Yeah, well, adoption is always important, no matter what industry you're in. It's even part of nature. You either adapt or, unfortunately, you don't survive. Now, so this is actually something really interesting that I learned just the other day, and it's that apparently Wi-Fi is more stable than cellular. So people in remote areas who you couldn't get a hold of before because they were using cellular, a landline, you can get a hold of them much more easily because Wi-Fi is a lot more stable. And I did not know that. And that was, a big surprise to me.
Yeah, I think it surprised many people, but they become, to your point, when people adapt whether it be by choice or by circumstance, oftentimes new opportunities emerge. And I think that's a great example. Whereas, Wi-Fi was almost, I can think of not too many years ago, where it was kind of thought of, well, if a little cafe had Wi-Fi, people kind of huddle around it. Now it's much more pervasive in most of your developed areas. And even, as you said, rural areas are in some ways just leapfrogging past worrying about, having cellular or what have you, because Wi-Fi is so much more stable and, wider information to be carried on it. So that's a fantastic example of adding that accessibility. And to your point, working with clients who often comes from more rural parts of the country, technology was often a laggard for them, whether it be, high-speed internet, it's always slower to adopt and so forth. So I think in some ways the pandemic forced people to adapt quicker and adopt it, and they realize they have greater access to information than they had before. So
yeah, it's amazing. Now, you did mention earlier on that you provide holistic services to your clients. Can you tell me a bit more about that? What do you mean by holistic? What are you including in that?
Sure. Holistic, in our view, is being totally comprehensive. Not just, portfolio management is obviously critical for what we do with our clients and for our clients. But that is really becoming, and I would argue, talk about evolution, I would argue that's becoming more of a table stakes, that every advisor out there is going to be offering investment management of some form or fashion. Holistic is looking at their comprehensive view from the tax planning aspect, from risk planning, as well as financial planning, retirement, all that together, and finding ways that oftentimes are overlooked by many advisors because they're so focused on a singular topic, whether it be risk planning or whether it be only portfolio management. So we look at it from the broad view and all the way down of everything that a client might encounter in their lives to generate their wealth as well as protect it. That's an area that we specialize in, and looking at it, as well as leveraging the beauty of alternative investments, which many advisors are still somewhat shy of. We think that there's another great opportunity for clients to participate in the benefits. 2022 really demonstrated that in spades, with stocks and bonds. In theory, are supposed to have low correlation or negative correlation, depending on which ones you're looking at. Not always the case. And it's typically when you need it the most. You need that diversification benefit. And in periods of financial stress, oftentimes they fail, right? 2022 wasn't unique in that. You can see that through history when there's periods of financial stress, economic stress, that the correlations usually start to diminish greatly, where alternatives have that ability to have either low or in some cases negative correlations with both stocks and bonds. It's a fantastic diversification tool that I think a lot of advisors are perhaps overlooking. Although many at today's conference, or this weekend's conference, they're certainly looking to take advantage of it. But I'm finding again and again that even clients, because it's new, it's kind of an early adoption, to your point earlier about adapting or not surviving. It's another tool that clients can take full advantage of to help bulletproof their portfolio.
Definitely. And I actually had a very interesting conversation with Daniil from Cerulli Associates. And he is in the alternative investment space. And he was speaking about all the innovation that's occurring, especially when it comes to providing more liquidity, because that was one of the traditional issues, right?
Correct.
One, it was only for like a select group of people, accredited investors. And two, you had liquidity issues. There were lock-in periods. Sometimes you were lucky if you could redeem once a year.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah, that is the whole theme here. Like your point is evolution and adapting rather, and I agree with that. I mean, you've seen effectively the democratization of the alternative space through the use of interval funds, and of course, there's a whole menu of a large number of alternative investments that you can purchase or invest in directly. But you're absolutely right. Having that diversification and one of the risks that people were concerned with is the liquidity. And the flip side of that I often mention is like, well, there's a reason they call it the illiquidity premium, is that you should, as an investor, should be deriving a premium because of that illiquidity feature. But it's precisely because of that illiquidity that alternatives in many cases are able to generate superior returns as well, because the money is there for an extended period. But your point is well taken, is that it is a ongoing concern by many. Is like, well, I can't get my money out. Interestingly enough, they don't often look at the fact that being able to access their typical stock or bond that they can sell at a moment's notice that are fully liquid, that comes with a cost. And that liquidity cost, that cost is that lower return potential. So.
Yeah, I think that liquidity premium is something that a lot of people overlook. Mm-hmm. It's sort of taken for granted. Oh, you know what? I should just be able to liquidate any position that as I see fit. So completely agree with you on that point. Now, we do have our Voice of the Advisor survey out in market. And since you mentioned holistic services, I'm curious to get your take. So we've seen that over the years, as we've been doing this survey, there's been an uptick in those that are leading with financial planning, financial wellness. And financial wellness, of course, being an umbrella term that includes all the other things that you mentioned, such as tax planning, debt management, elder care is becoming a lot more prominent now as well. Now, do you, or does your group, I would say, lead with financial planning, financial wellness services in order to get a better understanding of the client and then go from there to figure out what their needs are and how you meet them?
Ideally, that's precisely the goal, is to approach our clients and our prospective clients, hopefully future clients, in that comprehensive financial planning approach, because we view it's just a much better way to work with our clients and help them be better, right? And again, portfolio is certainly critical to their long-term success, but if you're focusing exclusively on the portfolio, which many advisors still do, which is quite fascinating to me. However, perhaps you overlook the fact that the client hasn't updated their estate documents in 15 years. And they're left in a situation where one of them unexpectedly passes on. That is not the position you want to be in as a financial planner, right? You're a financial advisor, right? You should be looking at all of those things. And these conferences, again, help reinforce the value of that. But I think that's another, to your point earlier about the evolution of our business, is that you're seeing this migration from the broker to the RIA space. And I would even argue the next migration is going to be in a differentiator, whether you're being comprehensive or you're simply a portfolio manager. And a lot of that's going to take time, but it's also going to take some ongoing education with the overall investing public to really understand the distinct difference between those two, right? And again, there's nothing wrong with portfolio management. It's a valuable and important component. But frankly, clients are just demanding more. They're demanding more capabilities, more services from their advisors. And as you said earlier, you either adapt as an advisor to be able to be in front and provide those services, or you're probably not going to survive very long in this business. So,
right. That makes a lot of sense. Now, one of the other things that we've noticed from our survey when it comes to hindrance of growth was, I believe, number one was lack of time so far with the preliminary data that we have. And number two was compliance. Mm-hmm. Now, I was in the industry myself, so hearing that compliance is a hurdle was not a surprise to me. How are you seeing it? Like, is compliance a major issue for you and your practice?
I think compliance is always an important issue because we work in a heavily regulated industry and with good reason, and we need to be very conscientious of how we're presenting information and being candid and transparent with everything, whether it be from your fees or to how this particular investment functions. I look at it as an opportunity to embrace it, right? Where many people kind of view it. I'm familiar with what you're referencing, that many people look at their compliance departments as kind of a business killing end of their business, right? What do they call it? Business development business destruction, rather. I see it a little bit differently. I've never had an issue with coloring within the lines, as my niece would say, because I think it's critically important. If you have running into those issues, it can become a burden when the regulations change as frequently as they have over recent years. particularly with different differentiators. But there again, it's important to make sure that we're being, at the end of the day, the rules and regulations are designed, not always perfect, right? Nothing is. They're designed with the client's best interest in mind. And I think sometimes advisors lose sight of that, about who the regulations are there to serve. It's not to serve the advisors. It's there to protect the investing public, right? And I think that's a distinct difference, that sometimes investors get a little too wrapped up in their own business and looking at it as like, this is stalling or slowing down me from being able to continue to work with more clients or work with different clients. Compliance is one, it's non-negotiable, right? If you want to work in a heavily regulated industry, so you either have to embrace it, or you spend inordinate amount of your time fighting it, which is not a productive way to go through your business either, right? You find ways to make it easier. I mean, for example, with our firm, we do everything digitally. There's no wet signatures, and that we found that to be a great way to help make sure that it's easier for the client, number one, and then of course it also abides and is compliant with the rules and regulations. So it's a fantastic way to make sure, for example, like our client relationship summary, the CRS, that's embedded in every one of our email links. So it's right there. It's available for the client. They don't have to go looking for it or hunting. It's right there, front and center. Because again, it's to protect the investing public. Right? That's the idea.
Yeah, well, that's great, and it's actually really interesting because I've had a few conversations with a few different advisors at this conference, and a lot of them have a similar stance to you, where yes, compliance is a burden. There's a lot going on there. Obviously, it can be very time consuming, but at the same time, they're not very, very opposed to it as someone, let's say 10 years ago might have been, right? Yeah. They realize that it is ultimately for the investor safety and client benefit. And they are willing to play ball essentially and make sure that they are doing things the correct way if they see a benefit for their business and for their clients, right? Right.
I agree with that. I think we're sometimes to the people that are concerned about the ongoing compliance or ongoing burden, increasing burden of compliance, whether it be from a monetary cost, because it costs firm money to obviously comply, and we have obviously legal and compliance departments and so forth. But the point being is that I think where most get their, at least in my experience, where the frustration, sometimes stress comes from when the rules aren't particularly clear or they're not being heard. As an example, that would be the recent changeover about of the distinction between the advisor ER, advisor OR. That's something I don't think the regulators have maybe fleshed out as well as they could have or should have. But again, you have to understand that they're in an evolutionary process too. So it's I think there's an opportunity there to help clarify that would be more transparent to the investing public if they truly understood what a registered investment advisor is. Just by having that name, that title difference can make a big difference in transparency as well. The industry is kind of fighting that in some degree, depending, because there's different angles coming from that as well. But at the end of the day, I don't see any harm in that if you're just being transparent and clear about what you actually do and what you provide, versus trying to mimic that term and maybe confuse the investing public. That's where I think, the regulators have a valid point, saying, hey, we need people to be, really understand who they're working with and whether they're offering advice on a fee only arrangement or if they're involved in a commission for the product that they may be placing. I think the industry overall could be a little bit better on that as well. But again, we're all human. Everyone's trying to, you like to think the best of people. So.
Exactly. Now, speaking of clients, how have client expectations changed? What have you been seeing the past little while?
That is, to carry on what we mentioned earlier, I think client expectations, albeit maybe a little slower in some ways, is certainly changing in the direction of migrating from, again, not just my wealth manager in the sense of, this is my guy or gal that manages my portfolio. You can see that migration is whether they're effectively demanding more and more services from their wealth advisors. And I look at those as an opportunity. If you can differentiate yourself and provide that, well, it's a fantastic way. It's a wonderful career to be involved in. But 20 plus years ago when I started, there were fee-based or fee-only advisors out there, certainly, right? It's not that new. But it's certainly migrating in that direction where you're seeing more and more moving away from the commission product approach and more into a fee-only arrangement. Even that is changing as well. Not some are, you can see the the structure of it being different too. where I can see the day where advisors are maybe changing almost to like a Netflix, like a subscription service. There's some advisors that already do that, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's the wonderful thing about this industry is it's very, I think it's very evolutionary. They're constantly in flux, and that with that comes opportunities, right? That you can help more and more people, and it's just a great way to have it structured so that people benefit from what you're doing. That's, I mean, a bit redundant, but if you're not there to help clients and be better at what they're hiring you to do, again, you're probably not going to be very successful in whatever line of work you're in. So.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think it's interesting. There is within the financial industry, or I guess the wealth management space, it seems like client expectations are being set by players outside of the industry. So, the examples that get mentioned all the time that we even spoke about at this conference have been Google, Netflix, Amazon Prime, especially where you're now used to getting your packages the next day. It's like, oh, I wanted this yesterday, it's here today. Or the fact that you log onto Amazon and it's giving you suggestions, right? Like, I'm always amazed that I go onto Amazon and it seems to know what I want before I know what I wanted. And so it seems like because of this, clients also expect their advisors to be more proactive. Mm-hmm. Come to me and tell me what I should be looking at before I come to you.
I completely agree. I mean, I was having a very similar conversation with a colleague in recent days about the differentiators, and that in some business. Some advisors are still working again with that old viewpoint, if I would say, and it's not an ageist thing. It's just that their viewpoint is reactive. Mm-hmm. They wait for the client to come to them. They wait for the client to come ask them about what should I do about X. Everything is structured of a responsive nature, right? And I think that those advisors' days are probably pretty limited because clients, to your point, that's not the experience they're having in other aspects of their life, whether it be like an Amazon example, as you mentioned. So the advisors that are more proactive are, again, and are quicker to adapt to that are going to be in a better position with their clients. And because it's always better to it's not bringing a problem, but bringing out an opportunity to a client or addressing an issue that you may identify in front of a client and bring that to their attention, then have them bring it to you and ask for your response. I also think, to add to that, I think clients are becoming savvier because of the access of information they have. So it's, again, they often do come to you with different questions or ideas, but the vast majority of them should be a kind of a push rather than a pull, where the advisors that are staying on top, and Michael Kitch just did a great job in his presentation earlier this week, where he talked about how advisors are structuring their business. And I thought that was pretty spot on with that, about the idea of, you need to be having a strategic plan of how you're interacting and engaging with your clients. Again, a differentiator, I would argue that many of the advisory firms that are out there today probably won't be here in 10 years because of exactly what we're talking about. If you're not adapting to being much more proactive, and it's not I don't even think it's really a choice. If you want to have a successful business in financial services, you need to be proactive and bringing things to clients' attention. And if you're not, well, then you're making yourself open for missed opportunities. So.
Definitely. And, it goes back to being able to keep up with the client, right? Because you're serving them. So you need to be able to keep up with whatever their new demands and needs are. Now, you have a very holistic and comprehensive business. So what are some of the best practices that your team utilizes in order to ensure that you are able to do all the things that you guys do?
That is an ever mounting challenge, because it's always in flux.
Yes.
But to your point, best practices in our view would be making things easy for clients. That's one of the best ways we found. One of our hallmarks of anything that we look to incorporate or change in our business. I mean, or our approach to clients. It's almost invariably done from the lens of, like, how can we make this simpler, cleaner, and easier for the client? Take away the burdens, the hurdles, anything they may run into. So, for example, providing them access to information that maybe they didn't necessarily ask for, but they might find it interesting and enjoyable, like about their financial overall wealth, like you said, the digital documents, anything that. And seeing this evolution of my career, I can remember before that digital documents were almost thought of as like the third rail. I mean, nobody wanted to touch a digital signature until they realized, like, hey, this can actually be a much better thing for our clients, more convenient. Now people, they buy houses and real estate through DocuSign. It's a perfectly legitimate way to go. Well, that's just one example, but if you're looking at it from the lens of like, how can I make this cleaner and easier? Or if I were a client, how would I want my process or my experience to be? I think that's one of the, as simple as it might sound, one of the best practices a firm can have is saying, remember, to your point, who are you serving? You're serving your clients, and make things easier for them, and they're going to be happier clients. And research shows again and again that happier clients tend to be longer term clients. So it's a mutually beneficial arrangement in that way. So
yeah, I would say there's a reason why everyone goes back to saying simplicity, it can be perfection, right?
Yeah.
If you keep it simple and easy, it's going to go down very smoothly. So that's perfect. Now, before we wrap up, what are your expectations for 2023 and beyond?
I'm an optimist by nature, so I'm very optimistic on it. Yes, there's certainly some things that I wish were slightly different. The Fed's decision the last 12, 15 months have been less than impressive, but I can't control them. All we can do is make better decisions for our clients. So I expect, if you're talking about the market, I expect the market to be doing just fine. With ongoing indigestion, which is ever present. But the bond market's probably going to present some opportunities here or there because of interest rates likely looking to change direction, albeit maybe a few more months down the road. But in terms of clients and the overall economy, I'm bullish, is what I'd say. I think there's lots of opportunities, not only in our business, but in the world overall. I think many people have perhaps a little too jaded view of the world, a little too negative, and consuming their time and effort focusing on all the negativity. And there is out there, we're all realists, but they're missing out on other opportunities while they're super focused on the negative. I tend to focus more on what are the opportunities to help, and let's focus on those and help our clients achieve what they want to achieve with their overall wealth.
Well, that is one of the things that we have in similar, Lance, is that I am also a perpetual optimist, which sometimes gets me in a bit of trouble. But, I believe that having a brighter outlook for the future is always a better way. It's a better life than, being down in the dumps, as they say, or being overly negative about things.
Yeah, if to be a capitalist, as I am, a dyed-in-the-wool capitalist, I think it's required for you to be an optimist. Otherwise, you couldn't possibly be a capitalist. You couldn't believe that things are going to be better. So it's an easy trap to fall into, to your point, because there's lots of negativity to focus on. But realizing that, hey, the world is so much better today than it was 5 years ago, and better than it was 10 years before that. I mean, I can't think of anyone that would willingly and knowingly want to relocate to any point in the history, 100 years, 200 years ago. The world is just so much better, and it's going to be even better 5 or 10 years down the road from now. So it's the beauty of our species. We're constantly looking for better, and you have to be an optimist to do that. So
I absolutely agree with you on that one. Lance, this has been a fantastic conversation. I've learned a lot. Thank you for sitting and chatting with me.
Thank you for your time, and thank you for your conversation here today as well.
Yes, of course.